Hi, my name is Cindy Rang with the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington, and today we're going to work on our Jaye's Bouquet quilt. All right, we are working on our Jaye's Bouquet block of the month, and what's really nice about this is there are 12 embroidery blocks and there are 12 pieced blocks. So each month we're doing two, one embroidery, one pieced block. If you don't have the pattern and you'd like it, we have it available on our website at fabricpatch.net, or perhaps your local quilt shop has it. And with us, maybe there's a possibility you have pre-purchased and you have the kit that you're working with all of the fabric kit, or maybe you have something else that you've put together that you're using. So last week we did the embroidery block for block number 1, and today we're doing the pieced block. So this was the embroidery block that we talked about, and I don't know, I suppose Brianna could probably link that video below. And then this is the pieced block that we're doing. And what's really nice with her block of the month pattern, she has this great big huge color piece, which is really nice because you can kind of see the hand embroidery in detail if you need to see that. And then here is the little tracing. She even talks about all of the stitches and the colors that she's used. I did some things a little bit different, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go. And then over here is the pieced block. So you can see this is the one that we're doing. We are going to do the blocks in order, month number 1, month number 2, month number 3, which is sort of funny because I think that this block is one of probably the more difficult ones that we're doing. Most of them are super simple, kind of fun blocks, but this one has kind of a fun little technique. So I'm going to show you the technique the way that she talks about doing it and teaches it, but I'm also going to show you a couple of variations of that. And I just want to mention that in her pattern, on the front page, on the back page, she does talk about this applique technique and how she does this. And I should mention before we go much farther that if you watch our channel, you know that we are a mother-daughter duo. We've owned a quilt shop in Washington State for 23 years, and now my daughter has her third daughter, Maisie, who's 4.5 months old, and Maisie hangs out with us during the day, too little to go anywhere else. And so on our first video, you heard her singing in the background, and there's a possibility throughout this video you will hear her. It's a whole lot of chatter and lots of happy sounds and vaguely distracting. So anyway, with that, let's go ahead and look at this fabric. Okay, so we are using, for this quilt, we are using the Jaye's Bouquet fabric line that was designed by Carrie to go with the pattern, and so I have my little bundle over here. When we did the fabric kits, we did it the way that she said. She had the list of all of these bits of fabric because she used a little bit of a teal solid here, a little bit of a dark blue solid here. She loved that peach, and there was some pink in there and some lime green. And that was how we did it. We did our first video where we talked about, gathering some fabrics and putting them together. I'm going to tell you that for my quilt, I am not using the solids, and I'm also not using so many bright colors. Just for me personally, I love the pattern. I love everything about it. But for me, I like a little more texture than what a solid will give me. And I also like a little bit more low volume, and so I don't do things with quite as much contrast. So there's an opportunity for you to not only maybe change up some of the stitches as we go along, but obviously to change up the fabric to anything that you would like. So you can see that for her, what she did was she picked on her primary print, she kind of fussy cut to make sure that there's a nice little owl. This is just a 2.5 by 12.5 inch strip that she put here. And then these pieces are 2.5 inches. So what I did, and that's what that background piece is. What I opted instead is I opted to use a piece from this for my centerpiece. I just kind of liked the way the bird fit in here. I liked the words humble, purpose, special, listen, belong. This is what my centerpiece is going to be. And then for the other two pieces, I picked this. I just really like, again, that whole low volume and that sort of minimal contrast. This is what my background piece is going to be instead of the teal here. And this is my little Drunkards Path kind of block. So that's what I picked, and you'll kind of see what that looks like, but mix and match and do whatever you would like. And even maybe you have one of our kits that we put together for you, and you just want to swap things out. Totally doesn't matter. You know, it's not going to make any difference at all. And the other thing that I'm using for this block is I am using that, why can't I remember what this stuff is called?
Shape Flex.
Shape Flex. Shape Flex. Shape Flex. So she was suggesting Shape Flex to put that behind our hand embroidery in the first block. I do not use Shape Flex. Shape Flex is a iron-on stabilizer. Machine embroiderers use it, which is why my daughter knows what it is. I am a hand embroiderer. I tried using it, and I think I mentioned in last class, I didn't particularly care for stitching through it, so I went back to my tried and true diaper flannel. But I am using this for the applique block, and I'm going to show you how we're using that so it doesn't go to waste. I actually really, really like it for the applique step, and I'll show you what I mean by that. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this. So first thing I want to mention is that there is this little applique shape. And so this is just a little piece of template plastic. You can use a cereal box, you can use card stock, an old postcard, anything that you'd like to cut up, you can use for this. You don't have to have anything special, but you want to go ahead and trace that that way. And I just want to mention, applique we know fondly as the A word, and some people don't like it. And let me just tell you, do not be afraid. This is a fairly simple technique. I'm going to show you how to do hand applique by machine is what this is called. I'm also, though, going to show you my hand applique work because that's actually how I prefer to do it. But anyway, so we have our little shape here. And then the next thing is she tells us, so I'm going to show you, here's my little piece here. This is what we're making. So the way that she suggests that you do it is she's telling you to go ahead and cut your rectangle of your piece, you know, whatever you're using right here. This will be, oh yeah, let me use this one. This will be a bigger, this will be this color right here. So she's telling you to cut this big rectangle, fold this over, and trace this on here. I usually use a friction marker because I don't have to worry about ink. This one I think is dyeing. Okay. So I've made my mark here. I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew this line. Okay, one little comment about sewing on this line is that you are going to want to decrease your stitch length. When I turn my machine on, it goes on to a 2.5. I went down to a 1.8. And what that means is that's just how many stitches in line. Do you hear Maisie? So sorry. Background music. The reason that you're doing that is, so let's just imagine that if you're making a curve, you know, if your regular stitch is like this, sometimes when you're making a curve, it's a little bit chunky, whereas if you have tiny little stitches, you can make a curve a little bit easier. Does that make sense? So that's why whenever we're curving, we end up shortening our stitch length from a stitch that's looking like this to a stitch that's teeny tiny. All right, yes, I wrote on this because this is just scrap. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cut this. And I'm going to trim this down. You know, we tend to do everything with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The reason that we do a 1/4 inch seam allowance is because of math, right? But when we're doing an applique, we could go just a little bit smaller than that, also because we did such a tight little seam allowance in there. So now I'm going to go to my iron and I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to press this. And as I press it, the other thing that I like to use is my little purple Thang. And so what I can do is just going to go ahead and stretch it, press it, and get that line nice and flat. Okay, so all I've done is I've pressed that. You can see right where my seam is. What actually has happened is I have a double-sided piece, and I can decide which one I want to use. If I want to use this side or this side. Actually, it's fairly similar. There's probably no difference, but there might be one where you have a bird on one side and not on the other side, and so that's how you can decide. Anyway, so once we've done that, the idea is that our background pieces, so we have our center piece, our curved pieces. Our curved pieces are going on top of these background pieces. In hers, you can see the background is that teal. My background is this. Well, now the problem is that this piece is humongous, and how do you decide how you're going to trim that up and fit that so that everything is uniform? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to take your ruler. Here's my ruler. I know that I've started with a 2.5 inch piece, so I went ahead and I marked where my 2.5 is. And of course, if you've watched any videos from me before, you know that I like to use a wet erase marker. I use the wet erase marker on my rulers because then when I'm done, all I have to do is just take just a wet paper towel or a finger, and I can take that mark off with a little bit of water. But what's really nice is that without that water, the mark doesn't come off onto my hand or onto my fabric. So I've cut all of these into my 2.5 inch squares, and then I've marked where that is. Then I took that same wedge, laid that down, and traced that so that I have that same mark. So you're going to lay this down, line that up, so that you can see exactly where you're going to cut something off. You can even kind of come over a little bit farther if there's something in particular that you want to make sure to get in there. Once you have that lined up just right, then you're just going to take your rotary cutter, this off, cut this off, and here's my piece. And then depending upon what you're using, I'm not using a solid, so then I get to decide if I'm going to cover up that or leave that as part of my background. Whatever it is I want to do, I'm going to lay that down. And now comes the applique part, the part where we're going to stitch that on. So let me show you her technique. Her technique, what she suggests is doing it with the fabric on both sides, and then she suggests sewing it down by machine. And we're going to talk about this machine stitch in just a second. But first, I want to show you the way that I did it, which is to use this shape flex. So the shape flex I thought was a little bit better for a couple of reasons. One is the thickness. You can't really tell, but for this one, this is 2 layers of the cotton fabric, and this one is the cotton fabric and the shape flex. This one is a little bit thinner, less bulky. The other thing is that this one had less waste, less fabric waste. So, and the third reason is that this one I was able to iron down. So let me show you what I mean. So the shape flex has one side, and you'd be able to feel it. You could tell that this side is rough and it is iron on, and then this side is just nice and soft. So I put the iron on side next to the right side, traced it the same way, sewed right on that line. Then all I have to do is flip around. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go over to the iron, and I'm actually going to demonstrate this one for you in just a minute. And then as I ironed that, then what I could do is when it came time to put this on this piece, it actually would iron down Okay, a couple things about ironing. One is I always keep the iron clean handy, just in case, especially when you're using fusibles. The other thing is I always keep my pressing sheet with me. In fact, I just always keep them right here tucked underneath my mat so they're ready to go. And because this is a fusible product, we do need to use our pressing sheet. And this is just a Teflon pressing sheet. Some of them are kind of this brownish color, some are white, whatever you prefer, whatever you have, it doesn't matter. It's not the same thing as a muslin pressing cloth, you know, for a perfect seam. This is something that is a non-stick surface. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the same thing. Get that all kind of ready to go, roll that edge. And this is on top of my I'm just going to press that down. So same thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick that up because you can see that that is a little bit tacky, a little bit adhesive now. I'm going to go back over and we're going to trim it. All right, so it's essentially the same idea, right? It's just, and maybe you can tell. I don't know, Brianna, can they tell?
Cannot tell.
No, cannot tell.
I would suggest that they do both types at home. They have enough fabric.
You're right. You totally have enough fabric. Yeah. And just see what you think. And especially if you already have the Shape Flex. But when I do this when I do almost any applique, I do this. I just don't always use Shape Flex, but I kind of like this. Where'd my ruler go? Because it is fusible. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and line that up on there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but my line follows that edge right there. Then I'm going to trim these off. And then what I can do is, again, deciding where I want to put this. I'm going to put that down, hit it with an iron. And now what's happened is, it's not that I can't pin, but I just don't need to because that's sort of stuck right on there. So what I would do is prepare all of these blocks. So this one, I'm just going to put a little pin in there. I have these done. Here's another one to trim. And I just wanted to show you, every once in a while something gets a little bit wonkadoodle, and it still isn't going to matter because you have enough room. You're starting with like these 3-inch squares. And so you still can lay that on there easily. It's still going to line up. And I still have plenty of room to trim that off so that every one of these Drunkard Path blocks are the exact same size, which is what you're going to want when you lay all of these out here. One other thing I was going to show you before we go too far, I'm doing all of mine like this. You can also do the same thing if you've already cut these, what are they, 3-inch by 6-inch rectangles, because that's what she had you cut. It doesn't matter. Go ahead and take your Shape Flex. I drew one here. I drew one on this side. And then I'm just doing 2 at once. And again, you don't have, since you have that nice tight stitch there, you can trim something that's a little bit smaller than a 1/4 inch. She cracks herself up. And then same thing, I'm just going to go over, press these out, press these really well, trim them, press these really well, trim them. So I'll finish all of those. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the stitch. I'm going to show you both the machine stitch and the hand stitch. Okay, I've switched over to this side. I hope that that's not super confusing, but so I want to show you a couple things. One is that if you look at her pattern and the way she's oriented her Drunkard's Path blocks, or you could also call these Road to Redemption blocks, she has hers like this. See? Like that. I have decided, however, I'm going to turn mine partly because of my background choice. Now, if I haven't sewn anything down yet, I really could change my background if I want to. I don't want to. I do like that, but I'm going to turn them like this. I think that's kind of cool. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And it looks like they're not going to fit, but they are. Remember, I don't have seam allowance in there yet. What will happen after we have all of these done, we're going to flip these over and sew our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then what will happen is they're going to fit on there kind of like that. And we'll have 6 going up on each side. So we've got our seam allowance in here and our 1/4 inch seam allowance across the side here. So it'll fit in there absolutely perfectly. All right, so let's talk about the 2 different techniques for applique. What she suggests that you do is this, it's called hand applique by machine. There's actually a whole book about it that talks about how to do it. And it's a great technique if you find hand applique to be intimidating. For me, since so much of this is handwork anyway, because of our hand embroidery, it's not really that difficult to do the hand applique here. So I've decided that I'm going to do hand applique, and I'll show you my technique for that. But first, let's go ahead and review this. So this block right here was done the way that she suggests. And I don't know if you can see up close. You probably are not going to be able to see those stitches. Maybe a little bit. Can you see those?
Just a little bit.
Little bit. Well, that's probably the best thing, because it should be just a little bit. They don't really want you to be able to see them. You could use a monofilament, which is like an invisible thread if you wanted to. A little tip about that is if you use an invisible thread on the top, you do have to use a cotton thread on the back. Don't ever put monofilament in your bobbin. It doesn't like that at all. What I tend to do is I use those 4 kind of basic thread colors, white, black, and then I use that banana color and that gray color. I used the banana one on this one. If you're using mostly dark fabrics, you could use that gray. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, what happens is this gray, I think the number is 2640 in Aurifil. What happens with the Dove gray is that whenever you're putting it on a dark color, it will look navy on navy, it will look black on black, it'll look brown on brown, it'll look dark periwinkle on dark periwinkle, it'll look purple on purple. It's sort of weird. I don't know that you're going to be able to see that. Do you think you are?
You want to know I'm chasing you around?
You're chasing you around? Can you see it now? Can you see it now? I don't know that you'd be able to see it, but you can see that it looks... Can you zoom in right there?
Yeah.
Can you see that looks lime green right there? Isn't that weird? And it looks periwinkle there. And it's kind of funny. What happens is the Dove gray kind of absorbs the color, and that pale yellow does the same thing with pastels. It'll look soft peach on soft peach, it'll look soft yellow, it'll look pink, baby blue. It's sort of weird. So anyway, I always have these 2 colors on hand. On this particular one, I used the banana. So what this stitch is it's your blind hem stitch. So let's go ahead and go to our machine for just a second. Okay, so I realize everybody has a different sewing machine. Mine is a Creative Sensation FAF machine, but this is the stitch that you're looking for. I mean, even if you only have 12 or 14 stitches, my guess is you have a blind hem stitch. So when you pick your blind hem stitch, this is what it looks like. On my particular machine, it tells me right where my needle is and where it will start. And if I stop, it tells it where it is. But that's what that little green line is. And down here is where you decide if you want to make your stitch wider, narrower here, and if you want to make it longer or shorter here. So what I did was I did some test stitches. So I'm just going to show you. Let's see if I have a little pointer here. So when I just turn it to right here and it is at 4.5 and 15 is my machine's measurement. Yours will probably be different. This is my factory. So this is just a little waist piece of fabric and a waist background so I can write on it so I can see what that looks like. So on factory, you can see this blind hem stitch. So it's stitching, stitching, stitching along the side and it cuts in. stitching and it cuts in. So what it's doing is it's just making a little stitch every inch or so. So what if I take this down to 3.0 right here? So what I did was I went down to 3.0 right here, and then I didn't write this down, but I know I went down to 10 because I wanted it to be also a little bit closer together. So this is 3.0, and you can see, you can probably still see that stitch. I kind of thought that that stitch was still kind of big, so then I went down to 2.0. At 2.0, can you see it? There's that little stitch. It's pretty tiny. It's probably 1/8 of an inch, probably. And then I went down even farther. I went down to a 1.0 and at a 10, and you can see the description of the stitch. It's teeny tiny, and you can see here, it is just a little tiny little bite into that edge right there, so that you really don't see that stitch very much. So this is the one that I picked, and I suggest you have a little waste piece of fabric where you do something like this and write all of that down, so that you will choose the one that you want and remember what it was on your sewing machine. And then let me show you what that looks like. So when you do it, it's going to stitch right along the side, and then it comes in for that little bite. And so I'm going fairly slow just because I want to make sure that I'm staying right along that edge. And I probably could change a thread color, but I'm only going to do these two like this to show you guys, and then the rest of mine are going to be hand applique, and I'll show you that stitch. What's nice about a faff is that when I stop, it'll stop it, well, in yours too, probably. If it stops in the needle down position, then my foot pedal raises also. All right. Looks like that. So it's really very nice because then if I don't want to do that handwork for whatever reason, you know, thumb arthritis, time, intimidation, whatever, this little blind hem stitch also, and we call it hand applique by machine, it has a really nice look to it. You barely see it. So this is option number 1. I'm going to show you the hand applique stitch. All right, let's talk about hand applique. Don't turn this off. Try this. This is like, I mean, even if you only try it with one block, I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised. I have changed a lot of people's minds about hand applique, so I actually really enjoy it, and it was kind of fun. We were looking to see which one. The stitch is so invisible that you can't even tell the difference between the one, oh no, that one's also stitched. We couldn't tell until we looked at the back. So so this one is stitched, this one is not. You absolutely can't see the stitch at all, and it's a super easy thing to do. The key is not in technique. The key is in the needle and the thread that you use. So this is the little thread thing that we send out to people if somebody says, gosh, I need some information about threads. This is our little just beginner packet that we send. It has a size 10 or an 11, either one are good, but a small straw needle, and then the embroidery needles. My 2 favorite needles that I use 99% of the time are the size 7 embroidery needle for embroidery and the size 10 straw needle for hand applique. So this is my hand applique needle, and a straw needle or a Milner needle is the same thing. just depending upon what country you're from. We call them something different, but they're hollow. And the reason that they're hollow is that or we like them to be hollow because they bend real easily. That also means that all of a sudden yours will be super bent and you just have to toss it, which is why you get so many in a packet. They're pretty inexpensive, but they're great for hand applique. So the eye of the needle is so teeny tiny, you really do have to have a needle threader when you use it. This one is my favorite. All you have to do is put the needle in the top right there, and then take your thread. You have a little thread cutter. Slide it down into, it says thread slot, put just a little bit of tension on there, hit the button, comes up, and you grab a hold of that and pull it through, and you're all set and ready to go. So the needle is important. The other thing is the thread. Let's talk about the thread for a second. This is teeny tiny thread. So this is, you can use a 60 weight or an 80 weight. The idea is that this thread is smaller than the cotton fibers, right? So if you have your cotton fibers here, this thread will rest in between the two, so that even if your stitch is bad, you won't be able to see it because it's smaller than that. So you can buy this a couple of ways. If you know a long armor that has some long arm bobbins in the 60 weight superior thread, that's the same thing. The other thing is this. They're in a fairly large package. If you feel like this is too many and you would never, ever go through these, we do have these packaged in a smaller package. I think there's 2 whites and 2 blacks in there, and you can buy them that way. Another option is this little 80 weight thread. It comes on this wooden spool. It's by Aurifil. If you think you're going to be, if you've tried this and you kind of like this and you want to get a couple of colors, again, I mean, I have it in quite a few colors, but I would recommend that you get the gray and that banana color, maybe a black and a white, and that's probably all you really need for hand applique. And then this is, you don't need that. Don't use that one. All right, so to do your applique, I wanted to show you one other thing. So this is the one that we did her way with the piece of fabric on the other side. If you do that, you do have to secure it. The reason that people use applique pins is because they're less bulky. I tend to not like applique pins very much because they're too tiny and I end up poking myself. So if I was doing it this way, I would instead just go ahead and use a couple of binder clips, one on this side and one on that side. But what's really nice about the fusible one is that we've went ahead and just fused it down, so I don't need any kind of a pin at all. So when I'm ready to start stitching, the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, do my quilter's knot. We learned that in the last class. And what you're going to do is take your needle and your thread. You're going to come into the center. So I've made this circle, and I'm going to wrap it about 3 times, 4, doesn't matter. I'm basically doing a French knot in the air. So I'm holding those wraps and I'm pulling my thread through, and there's my little knot. Ooh, that's not a very big knot. I forget this is a teeny tiny thread. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it like 6 times. Okay, now I've got a big knot. All right, so then what I'm going to do is, okay, so to start, I'm going to come up. The whole idea is that, okay, let's pretend that this is my edge, right? So I'm going to come up and I'm going to be stitching on this underside edge. So that's what I'm doing here. And you can kind of see here that the underside edge is that little, what's it called? Shape flex. Is the shape flex. But whatever it is, that's really where my stitches are going to be, is just underneath there. And this is a good time to mention that this particular interface, this particular stabilizer, will stay. So this is a permanent part of this quilt. If you happen to have a wash away stabilizer, it will not work with this technique, right? Because then as soon as you wash this, everything is going to kind of fall off. So the other thing is that needle turn applique. That's why we do needle turn applique, is because that little fold that's underneath there, that's where our stitch is going, is in that edge. Does that make sense? It'll make sense as we go. All right. Okay, so I'm going to come up so that my knot's on the back. And I'm going to come out. Can you see where I'm at?
Yeah, we can see it.
And then, again, we talked last time about being a stabber or a swooper. A stabber will go down and then find a way back up. I will just go ahead and go down and see where I'm at. So here's my edge. I'm actually going to go in just a little bit to right about there. And I'm going to come up. Oops, sorry. Right there. See where I'm at? Just underneath that fold. And some people feel like they want their stitches to be super close together, but let's just remember for a second that this one, look how far apart those stitches are. There's one there, and then we've stitched along, and about a quarter of it, maybe a half an inch, there's another one. About a half an inch, there's another one. Mine are going to be a little bit closer together than that, but you don't have to go crazy. Okay, so I'm going to go back down and see where I'm at. I'm kind of underneath that edge, and I'm going to come out. See, I'm underneath that stitch right there. Okay. I'm going to go down and then come up. See where I'm at? Same place. So far my stitches, that's just a thread. You can't see a single stitch. I'm going to stop talking so she can fast forward through this, but I'm going to go ahead and finish these stitches. Okay, so when I'm done, I do secure this. So just like in hand quilting. And the difference here, when we talked about the hand embroidery last time, I said that with hand embroidery, I just do 2 knots. And that's just because of the size of the thread and because of what it is. With hand applique and hand quilting, we do 3 knots. So you just take a tiny little bite of the fabric, pull it through there 3 times. And then I cut that off. I'm just going to give it a little shot with the iron. And there you go. So if we looked up close, it truly is invisible. I'm going to turn it on its side so you can see. So I think that if you which no one is going to be able to do that with your quilt when your quilt is quilted, but if you really peeked, you could kind of see that little bit of that stabilizer there. But where's my other one? Here is the one that I did with the fabric, and you can see that also. You can still see that seam. So, and see, can you see the stitches there? Mm-hmm. So see, they're big stitches, right? It's not crazy. People think that applique is teeny tiny little stitches. It's not. They're just hidden because we're underneath where we were. And that stitch that's I have things that I've appliqued years and years ago that have been washed multiple times. It totally stays, and it's absolutely invisible. Okay, Maisie's about over it, so we're gonna hurry. So I just have to finish stitching the ones that I haven't. I'll end up putting these together, and again, because I've got my 1/4 inch, see how it's on both sides, I'm just going to go ahead and, oops, without flipping them, sew those one at a time, press those open, sew those one at a time, press those open. There's going to be 6 on each side. Once I've done these strips, I'm going to go ahead and sew this together, give it a good press, and I'm done with my block. All right, and Maisie says she's over it. I'm going to go pick her up, and so now we have covered our hand embroidery block for block number 1. We've covered our piece block for block number 2, and don't fret, this probably is the most difficult of the blocks that we're doing, but this was a really good one to start with because hand applique, super underrated, really cool finishing technique. It looks really, really nice, and it's not that difficult to do. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you next month for block number 2. Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.